and welcome to this week's episode of the Legal Beagle podcast. This guest this week is someone I have chased down for months and months to get onto this podcast. He is incredibly busy, but also incredibly generous with his time. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Mark Breyer.
I wasn't running to avoid you. I was intimidated. The Legal Beagle podcast is growing in viewers. It's got more and more people subscribing, and it's a lot of pressure to be here. So thank you for patiently waiting till I could get the courage up to finally jump in.
I mean, we do have this incredible Legal Beagle background now. So,
I mean, look, I got like just random stuff and a copier over my shoulder, and you have a bookcase that looks like it's, it's overly impressive. That could be in some judge's chambers in the Supreme Court. How am I supposed to measure up?
Well, hopefully it won't intimidate you too much today. So I was looking at your bio on your website, and here's what I'll tell you, viewers and listeners. This is probably, Mark Breyer is one of the most credentialed people I have ever come in contact with. His awards section of his biography is so impressive. It would take the entire podcast for me to do it justice. So what I'm going to tell you to do is go to his website, which is www. Does anyone say www anymore?
Yes, you just did it.
Okay, I did. www.breyerlaw/Mark-Breyer. And you will see this incredible bio. The guy has been practicing law for, was it going on 3 decades now?
I think it's forever.
Yeah, since law was invented.
That's right. I think around, I think we're at year 25 now.
Wow. That is incredible. So you are one half of the husband and wife law team. Tell me about, because everyone wants to know, what is it really like to work with your wife?
That is a question, honestly, Jonathan. I get asked that question probably more than anything I get asked. Not when you're talking about real things, but when you just meet people, that is maybe, other than why do you keep smiling? Would you stop doing that? But other than that, the other most common question is, what's it like to work together? How do you do that? I could never do it. Now, she would have a different answer because I drive her nuts. But for me, it's awesome because, this job, I think any job that you care about deeply can consume you, right? So when you're having something tough going on, or, you need to stay really late, or I want to spend all Sunday working on something, I don't have to say, well, let me explain why this is a big deal. She gets it. And I really think we put a lot of things in place over the years that have come from the fact that we can bounce things around. So it's really it's an unfair advantage for me personally for my life, because instead of you have things going on at work and you want to talk it out, but there's no one who can really get it. When I have things going on at work and I want to talk it out, she gets it. And so it's been, are there negatives? Yeah. I mean, she's done this less, but in the last few years, but the number of times over the years, she would wake me up in the middle of the night because something work related was on her mind. Because I can't do the typical husband thing of just listening, like, I don't know what she's talking about. I know what she's talking about usually. So she would want to talk about it whenever she wanted to talk about it. And I couldn't fake like I didn't know what she was. Anyway, so there are downsides. But overall, it's been really good.
So you and Alexis, the other half of the husband and wife law team, have built one of the biggest personal injury practices in the state of Arizona over the last 25 years. Was that the goal when you guys started? Was the goal to be one of the big boys in town, or did that happen organically?
So that is a tricky question. What I know for sure is I was never going to advertise. So I wanted to be, my goal at the start was I wanted to be a great trial lawyer, something I have not yet achieved, but I'm trying to improve on. But that I knew I wanted that. Like, I knew exactly what I wanted on the day I started practicing. I complained to the first lawyer I worked for, or the law firm I worked for before we started this. And I was frustrated with him. I told him he hadn't given me an arbitration, and I had been there for 3 weeks. And I told him it was the biggest waste of talent since Jordan got cut from his high school team. And I was so excited get into arbitrations and trials. But I knew I had very strong opinions on advertising lawyers, and they were not good. The story I tell, which is funny now, actually, there's several of these related stories, but we had an advertising lawyer come in when I was working in a restaurant called Sweet Lorraine's in Detroit, or in Southfield, where I grew up, right near Detroit. And one of the advertising lawyers sat in my section. I was a busboy. I would not bust his table. I made my friend I grew up with, Hans, bust his table. I wouldn't touch his table because I was like, I had such strong feelings on what. So did I want to be big? I don't know. I know I wanted to be really, really good. And I know I definitely was never going to advertise and lower myself to advertise to do it. So I know that's probably you asked me a simple question and I complicated it with a long answer, which you're going to find for this podcast I will do repeatedly.
Perfect.
That's really where I was. So it was neither, was it exactly.
So how did you, as you guys started to advertise and become regular, familiar faces on television, on the radio, on billboards, how did you reconcile that coming from that time period where you were like, that's not really what I want to do. That's not who I'm about.
It remains a struggle for me, even though I'm obviously all in. But so it's a great question. So first, what happened was, well, let me put it in some context. In spite of the fact that right now the poor people of this state can't enjoy a few hours watching TV without being annoyed by our ad. So it probably feels like we've been annoying these people forever. The truth is, for over half of our practice, we didn't advertise on any TV or radio or billboard. We had some yellow pages, stuff like that. And then through kind of a weird set of circumstances I won't bore you with, someone made a mistake on our ad, so they gave us a bigger ad for free, and that company got bought out by a much bigger company, and all of a sudden we had a big ad in a yellow page that was in a lot of homes, which had not been the plan or anything else. And that's when we found out, like the day as that book hit the street, we found out advertising worked. And then it hadn't really been the plan. And it was like, whoa, because we had really grown through word of mouth. But for still over half of our practice, we were not doing any advertising in terms of TV, radio, billboard, that type of stuff. The stuff that I was turned off to, so to speak. I never had an issue with print advertising. Why? I don't know. You can make an argument that what's the difference? In the end, you're reaching out to people trying to, but in my mind, there was a difference. And I would still say I see a difference even at this point, although it's a blurrier line than it used to be now with everything digital but in any event, and so when we first we knew advertising worked, yellow pages were dying. We truly believed that we did a very good job. I mean, I will say this, I've said it repeatedly, even when I'm not, saying it publicly, I say it with my team all the time. This state, the state of Arizona, has so many amazing lawyers. And so I don't believe it when anyone tries to stand up and hold themselves out to be the best lawyer, top 3 or this other stupid stuff that I'll sometimes get like, every year now for a number of years. Avo does, I don't know exactly how they do their lawyer ranking thing, but they have some sort of whatever that, and so we'll be named top 5, which is insane, not true, because there aren't 5. I don't know how many of us that live this stuff and breathe it and actually care and dig into it and aren't going for the quick buck but are trying to change the lives of the people who trust us exist, but it ain't 5 and it's not 10. And I don't know if it's because it's hard to get a sense for how many of us there are, but there's a bunch of us, and I'm sure this is true in every state, by the way, that truly care. And I don't mean they say they care, but then they'll, go, well, that'd be a lot of work to try the case. I mean, they're willing to put up the fight, and they're willing to stand by a client even if the evidence isn't there, and go to battle. And obviously, it's just in a courtroom. So, but willing to stand up and take the risk of time and money and effort. So to bring that back around, so when did we end up doing this? It was, slow. We dipped our toe in. We tried one little commercial that said, here's a book we wrote, would you like a copy of the book? And then it slowly evolved. And the reason it evolved, I can't help it. I'm an open book, is it works. And the problem with advertising is that the consumer does not know the difference. Many consumers do not know the difference between the lawyers that fight the fight and the lawyers that will end up putting them in a much worse place for having hired the wrong lawyer. And so you end up in a situation where many of the best lawyers that you and I know that have the undying respect of the people who do this for a living are sometimes struggling to get cases. And then there are lawyers who would need to put the courthouse into their phone to get directions. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing wrong with that unless you're holding yourself out as someone who's going to, I care, I'm going to do a great job. But when the offer comes in and that offer is half of what it should be, but you don't have to litigate, you tell your client to take it. And then you take your full fee and you don't even know how to fight the lien. So the client ends up getting no phone calls, no communication, worse results, less in their pocket. But the consumer, the problem with TV to me is the consumers many consumers see lawyers as nothing more than a gallon of milk. And if the gallon of milk is being sold for $3.50, but the one next to it's on sale for $2.50 this week, they grab the $2.50 gallon of milk. Now, there are people who can tell the difference between a gallon of milk, my kids included. I can't tell the difference. Whatever's on sale is the one I grab. But lawyers, at least speaking for injury lawyers, are absolutely not like that. The difference in the outcome for our clients is massive. And so, I do think, as I'm sure many believe, that on average, a disproportionate percentage of the lawyers who advertise, and I'm speaking very broadly, not just Phoenix, not just Tucson, not just Arizona, but throughout the country, a disproportionate percentage of the lawyers that don't do this the right way are advertising. But you don't have to pick. You can be, I believe, a tremendously caring lawyer who builds systems to do things the right way so that people who hire you are better off than if they had hired others and still advertise. But even though I truly believe that, and though I think polygraph tests are a farce, I don't think you can trust them. And I have a lot of reasons why I believe that. If they were true, if polygraphs were valid, I think most people would say you can't be an advertiser and be great at what you do if you're an injury lawyer. And I would absolutely pass the polygraph that you absolutely can. You can be someone who reaches out to a lot of people without getting away from doing it the right way. But you got to be very intentional about it, which probably has absolutely nothing to do with the question you asked me. I told you up front, I will take every question, complicate it, and drag it out. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts.
Why did you and Alexis take the firm into injury law in the first place? I know that people know you're an injury lawyer, but why injury law?
That was known when we opened. So first, for me, I knew when I went to law school, I wanted to be a trial lawyer. It's why I went to law school. When you went to law school, did you know you wanted to be a trial lawyer?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. I actually didn't even know what it was called. I just knew I wanted to be up in that courtroom arguing and advocating for people.
So were you surprised when you got to law school and met a bunch of people that had no interest in being in court?
I was shocked. I thought everyone went to law school to go into the courtroom. I was surprised how many people didn't ever want to step foot into that courtroom. There
was only one lawyer in my neighborhood. Like, of all the parents I knew, there was one lawyer. There was only one friend. So I knew one lawyer in my life. It was the dad of one of my friends I had known since elementary school, but I didn't know many lawyers. When I got to law school, I was aware of the fact that not all lawyers went to court. But in my mind, they were the exception to the rule. I was shocked, and I agree with you. I don't know if I would have used the term trial lawyer, but I knew I wanted to be in trial. And so the two choices, if you want to be in trial, are to be in criminal law or injury law. And even though, I don't know what it's like in the criminal world, but of course it's getting harder and harder to try a lot of cases in injury law. But at that time, you could still get to court frequently. You still can, but it's harder and harder, right? The number of cases settling continues to rise up. And so, I'm sorry, yeah, the settlements are going up. So I knew I didn't have a huge interest in criminal law once I was exposed to it. I was exposed to it a little bit in a clinic in law school. And at that point, I was kind of like, also the reality is if you are a prosecutor, you can be the greatest person in the world. If you are a prosecutor and you do it long enough, you are going to put an innocent man in prison. Not because, prosecutorial discretion is an amazing thing, but our system isn't perfect. And so you see all these horrible examples where prosecutors did not use discretion and people went to prison because the prosecutors wanted the conviction more than they wanted to use discretion and make sure they weren't, to do what's right, I would argue. But even the people who do everything the right way have the risk of putting the wrong people in prison. I read a book, it's called Picking Cotton. And it's a fascinating book about a guy named Ronald Cotton who was sent to prison. He writes half the book, and the woman who accused him, who was in fact raped, but raped by someone else, writes the other half of the book. But the prosecutors in that book, and at least if you take what's in the book, if you take it at face value, and I thought it was a convincing book that people seem genuine, don't know, but seem genuine. I think that prosecutor was devastated because he truly felt like he had done all the right things to make sure he only put guilty people in prison. Is that a reason not to be a prosecutor? No, it's not. Being a prosecutor is a key to our system, but it was a reason that would have made it, it would have been harder for me to choose that path. And on the flip side, there is no realistic way that if you're doing typical criminal defense, that you're not defending people who are guilty, which may not be so bad in a shoplifting charge, but as the crimes go up, it's a bigger and bigger thing. I think people who do criminal defense need to be applauded because they stand up to what's popular to do what's right. And I think they are an absolute key to our system as well. But I was pretty sure that also maybe wasn't my thing. And so the other choice was injury law. So I knew when I was still in law school that I wanted to be in this. But I don't know that I knew I wanted to be on the injury side versus the insurance defense side. I don't think I cared. I'd have to give that more thought, but I don't know that I cared very much. I just knew I wanted to be in there trying cases. And so by the time we started our practice, Alexis worked her way through college, working in a law office as a legal secretary and paralegal that did workers' comp, plaintiff side workers' comp, and plaintiff side injury law. More comp than injury, but both. So it was a natural fit for her. She wanted to do it. I wanted to do it. So the area of law, but I will tell you in the early days, we turned down because we've never done anything but injury law. I can tell you it was very hard to turn away the DUI cases that would have brought us money when we didn't know how we were going to pay the bills that month. But we did. We were like, this is what we're going to do, and this is all we're going to do. And now for whatever it is, 24, 25 years, however long we've been in this practice, I think we just finished 24, starting 25, something like that. But anyway, for as long as we've been in this practice, it's been all plaintiffs' injury stuff.
Mark, do you love to win or hate to fail?
I'm sad to say that answer. When I win, I think I know, because I've given this a lot of thought. That's a great question. When I win, I always feel like justice was done. And I've never won a trial where I came back going, look what I did. Because I've always felt like the jury got it right. And when I lose, I'm always absolutely certain that it's my fault we lost. And if I had done something differently, we would have won. And I was just having this conversation last week because I will have these random times, which unfortunately are too common, where I will start thinking about a case I lost. Some in particular, a few that I think about all the time. And I just know, I truly believe had I struck a juror that ended up being the foreperson, if I had made this argument a different way, because, and I don't know how you experience it, but there are cases that I know the odds are against me. By the time I get to court, I'm convinced we should win. My last trial before COVID hit was a case of a girl who rear-ended the car in front of her and then gave a recorded statement 3 days later where she said it was her fault. The car came to a stop. She didn't stop fast enough. She ran into the back of it. That was my client. So I've never tried a case where my car rear-ended the car in front of them. And I may have tried cases before where my client admitted fault and when facts came out later, adjusted for it, but I don't remember. But I know, I'm confident I've never tried a case where I rear-ended the car in front of us. It came out later that a witness said that's not what happened. She was on her phone. She swooped in and slammed on her brakes. And my client had a head injury. And the girl got out and said, I was in the lane, you stopped, and she believed it. And then we got another witness who said she was looking down at her phone, although she didn't have her swooping in and stopping. So we had all this vague information. The jury deliberated for like 4 hours. And I'm still mad at myself because the person who was the foreman was the person I had planned to strike and then changed my mind and struck someone else at the last minute. And I don't know what happened in the jury room, but I think there's a good chance that the foreperson took 4 hours on this relatively simple, relatively minor case. Generally speaking, we weren't even asking for that much money, but it was a relative that why would it take 4 hours to deliberate and still not get a unanimous verdict? It is not unreasonable to believe had I just stuck with my first plan that we get a split of fault, which is what it should have been, in my opinion, with the facts. And even that one continues to bug me. And if we had gotten a home run, I wouldn't have even changed her life. I have a couple cases that really I can't put down. Do you have that? How do you handle that? And so I don't get a thrill of victory. If Michigan State wins, I get a thrill of victory. When I win, I'm like, yeah, justice was done. And it feels good and it's super rewarding, but I don't really ever feel like, look what I did. And I have to somehow, maybe you can help me on this podcast, but there's got to be a way to stop doing that. But so far, that's where I'm at in my life.
Well, I agree with you. I think the wins are getting back to where it should have resolved in the first place. So I don't look at it as a win as a +1. A win is just where this case should have resolved for in the beginning. The losses sting. And here's what I think I've learned over my career, even before working in law. The reason that the losses stick with you in any capacity, in any profession, is because it matters. If they don't, and you can just let them go, I don't know that you connected as much as you probably do to these cases. And I think that's an important attribute to really good trial attorneys. I really do believe that. I believe the ones who say, you just wash it off and move on to the next one. That's dismissing an entire person and an entire situation, an entire set of facts, and an entire life that may have been altered by that. And so I internalize a lot of that stuff. It's why I don't sleep very well. But the reason I do is because you can learn from all of that. There's growth that comes from that. And although I may not be able to go back and fix what I could have done differently in that case, I feel it is a step forward for the next person that I get to represent in that capacity. And so I run those back continuously. The best lesson, Mark, that I ever had is I ran out of law school and ran right into the courtroom, which is unheard of in this profession, because as you said earlier, it's hard to even get in the courtroom. It was a little insignificant red car, blue car, but I was just guns a-blazing. I'm going to go do this. And I got smoked by the defense. It was the best cautionary tale I ever could have experienced in my life because it taught me what to do and what not to do and what to be aware of. It didn't make me gun shy. It didn't make me afraid to step in that courtroom, but it did help me understand the need for preparation, the need for strategy, the need for leaning on people that are far wiser than I to help me frame a case. And the client looked at me after we lost and said, "Thank you for trying." And that meant the world to me because it wasn't like, "Oh, you screwed it up." It was, "Thank you for giving it your best shot." Because I believed in her and I believed in what happened, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. And that's what the defense continued to do throughout the entire case was no, no, no. And I just said, I'm not going to accept that until the jury came back with that. The jury actually told me, I got to poll the jury after, and they said they liked me. It wasn't my presentation. They didn't necessarily love my client and the way she presented. And I was so focused on the case and the facts and the evidence, I forgot to talk about my client about smiling in the courtroom and about being endearing to the jurors that are going to make a decision on her case. I just forgot, didn't think about it. And so those are things that I've learned and now I'm hyper aware of and certainly more committed to going forward with the cases I get to take into a courtroom. I won't miss those small details, which are, I think, important to the work that we do.
I have a theory, maybe it's not a theory, a hypothesis, that 51%, a minimum of 51% of every plaintiff's personal injury case comes down to the plaintiff and the jury. And we spend all our time on the other 49% or less. Let me show you how good I can get at theming. Let me show you how good I can get at focus group and picking out the right things. Let me show you how good I can get at framing. Let me become the best cross-examiner I can be. Let me learn how to do amazing things with my opening and how to convince people in closing. And in the end, if you let me pick the jury, you can pick the facts. I heard that early in my career, and I think it's true. You could find at any given time, I realize in Arizona we don't have full 12, but you can find 12 people in any jurisdiction who will think the president is an alien. And you can, if you let me go pick out the people, you can say whatever you want. And the reality is that we are all overwhelmed with biases, and people who get pulled for jury duty are no different than you, me, or anyone else. We are all overwhelmed with biases. And the people who think that they're unbelievably neutral are just living with their own biases they just can't see. And so trying to figure out the right people, which of course is challenging when the judge says you have 20 minutes, Mr. Breyer, to talk to these 45 people and find out, what they have to say. By the way, I've been able to make a deal about half the time with these judges that can my clock run during voir dire, but give me the time to talk to them. Maybe not half, but maybe a third have agreed with me that, okay, I'm watching your time. So if your time come off voir dire, because I'll shorten everything else. I can shorten my cross. I can shorten my direct. I can get through. In any TV show or movie, they do an entire opening in 3 minutes. I'm not that good, but if I need to, I can shorten things. But I don't want to shorten the one chance I get to figure out or try to figure out who actually can't stand everything about my client's case or injury law in general that is going to torpedo what we're trying to get across the ocean. And the client is so vital, and I'm sure you've seen things as I have, but until 10 years ago maybe, people would talk about the client, but there wasn't a lot in terms of systems to try to help clients be better at testifying, to help them go beyond just who they are. And I don't just mean going, here's the, be ready for this and ready for that, or even doing the ghost, cross-examination. I mean, truly giving them ways where they can go in with some degree of confidence and be prepared for whatever may come. And I'm nowhere near the best at it. I'm just a student. It probably wasn't even 10 years ago, but I have seen that can make a difference, and that taking people and helping them get prepared, I think increases the chances, because I think other than the jury, our clients are the most important part of the story.
What do you think, if you could narrow it down to one? I know this is going to be difficult because there's a lot, but as we talk about voir dire jury selection, what do you think the biggest misconception is about injury attorneys? Like the one that rises all the way to the top.
Well, that's easy. I think, and they're not wrong about all of them, but I think if you ask people what they think of injury lawyers, particularly people over about 35 or 40, and I'll explain that in a second, but they absolutely see us as just a greedy group of people. It's all about the money. And I think there are people that's what attracts them to law. The thing about injury law, it's not just injury law, but it's included in injury law, is if you don't want to work hard and you don't really care how the results are, then you can make a living just taking money off other people being hurt, not by making their lives better, but by doing it the wrong way. And because this is what people see, and I think that the reason it matters more, in my experience, and I say this because one of the things that happens for me is when I go in, when I stand up for voir dire, I now get to ask a different question than I ever used to ask, and most lawyers get to ask. And that is, you've seen me on TV, and here's my client or client sitting here, and you know, and Sarah is counting on me to make sure that she gets a fair shake at this. But some of you are gonna hate my commercials or hate lawyers on TV, and I get it. And I'll sometimes tell my story of my own personal thoughts and my parents' thoughts on lawyers who advertise, or what they were when I was growing up. So I think for people where lawyer advertising wasn't how they grew up, and then it started happening more and more, certainly people over 40, I think their view of personal injury lawyers is different. I think for the people who have always known lawyer advertising the same way they know Coca-Cola advertising or anyone else advertising, I don't think a lot of the ads impact them as much. They just see it as, someone trying to generate business through advertising. But I think first of all, I think greed is a huge, very, very strong belief. And I'll tell you, it was mine. I mean, the reason I wouldn't bust that dude's table, I didn't know him. I just saw it as just a scummy way you're making money off of other people's misery. I honestly don't know anything about him, and didn't then. I just knew you're a lawyer on TV going, if you're hurt, call me, which also never made sense to me, by the way, because it was always like, how do you get paid off someone else getting hurt? And you gotta live in this world to go, heart surgeons get paid off heart attacks. Heart surgeons get paid to do open heart surgery for people who, either through genetics, lifestyle, or both, have heart issues. I suspect most heart surgeons aren't cheering for people to go out and have heart attacks or need quadruple bypasses. I would think that's not true. Do they love surgery? Yeah, and I love going to trial. But they're hoping, and by the way, I'm the world's biggest fan of the day we have reliable automated vehicles, because I never again want to sit in front of a family who's lost a loved one, and now I'm the lawyer, or someone who will never regain full function, and I'm there to try to do what I can on the other side of it, which is the money, or even people who are lucky enough to get over it. We've all gotten so used to people getting hurt that it's become something we just accept. So-and-so was in a bad collision. Oh, that's horrible. But not like, how could that happen? Because we're so used to it. And I think we're closing in on a day where with technology, this will be a thing of the past. They'll talk about someone getting hurt on the roadway as I can't believe that happened, as opposed to an everyday thing. And so there are absolutely a lot of people that care deeply about people and don't want to see people get hurt, but see us as the difference potentially in their lives. And the people who say money doesn't matter, I have a whole list of people that I can have them talk to, and money does matter. Now, it is true that money is never as important as health. You take somebody, and obviously we can't ask this to the jury because of the golden rule, but ask anyone if they give up their health. How much I got to pay you to give up your eye? How much do I have to pay you to never be able to use that arm again? For most people, there's not a number. Wait, I never get to use my dominant hand again? Yeah, there is. No, I don't care. No, I'm not taking your $1 million. No, I'm not taking your $2 million. No, I'm not taking your $3 million. Because they know the importance of health. Nothing's more important than health. I get that. I think it's the reality. I think it's a reason why lawyers need to not, when we do what we do, it's not about getting in the client's ear about how badly they're hurt, because I think that there's a trust that people have for their lawyers. And when you get in your client's head about how badly hurt they are, they start believing it. The same way as when doctors give a label to their patients, my clients believe those labels, and those labels are powerful. And what I think we ought to do is say to our clients, your job is to get better. And the faster you get better and the more you defeat or do better than what the doctor says to you, not only is that good for you, which is what matters, it's better for your case, because no one's going to question you later. And I don't care what the doctor said about your permanent injury. You can beat that. He's got to say that because he's worried about what people will say. If he tells you you'll be fine and then you're not fine, don't listen to the doctors when they label you. Listen to their advice and get better. And I think we can make a difference. Do I think, we're the key to our clients getting better? No, but I think we have to be really, really careful as lawyers about not over focusing on their limitations, because if they start labeling themselves that way, I think it matters. And again, this has nothing to do with your question, which I just went totally off the rails on. But in fact, I don't remember what the question was. I hope somewhere in there, Jonathan, I answered it.
I think you did. But it transitions well to the next question, which is, how do you stand in front of the jury and ask for a big verdict? You've done it. You've been successful at it. How do you do it and make it not awkward?
So let me tell you how I did it wrong for a long time. I think I didn't believe my number. I didn't, I have this thing I say to juries, which may not be what any of the experts think I should say. It has worked for me, but maybe it hasn't, and I don't know. But I think that there is a feeling, no matter what they said in voir dire, and no matter what the law is that's read to them, that what difference is this money going to make? And I think that it is a common conversation from having done many, many, many focus groups that, okay, you want to give this money, what for? And I think that for me, it is comfortable to say to juries that some of you are going to say to yourselves, we can give, Joe all the money in the world. It doesn't fix what happened. And you're right. All the money in the world will not undo this injury. And just like if you give him nothing, it won't make the injury itself worse. It may make his situation worse, but it won't make. So money isn't a solution. Money is the best solution we have, because otherwise people who harm people through their carelessness and their choices and change their lives forever get to walk away scot-free. And that's not our system either. We don't go, well, since you made the mistake, but you can't actually fix it, hey, nothing happens to you. It's all, the whole burden's on them because you can't fix what you've done to them. And so I like to have that conversation because it makes me more comfortable than talking about the money. Now, if you put, the best trial lawyers in the country, of which I am not, in the room with me, they may all tell me why I shouldn't do that. But I will tell you that just standing up and saying $1.6 million without and usually I come up with some reason for whatever it is. But I like to have, at least for me, an honest discussion at that point. I can be passionate at times, and there are whole trials where I'm always calm and cool, and there's other trials where, based upon the nature of what's going on, I may get after it in varying degrees. But I think when I talk money, I usually want to have a conversation, and I will say that I think money does matter, and I think it matters to the clients, and I think it even matters in some ways to the defendants, the ones who deep down know. I don't mean they're lawyers who have a job to do, but when these juries do what they sometimes do, which is give nowhere near enough money to say to the person who was hurt, we understand what you were going through. We know this changed your life when it did. We know it changed your life forever when it did. That money matters. And I don't know how your experience, but I'll tell you mine. In fact, I wonder sometimes why, because I don't think my experience is universal, but most of my clients don't talk to me about money almost ever. And I am usually the first person to raise money, and it's well into the process. So I've talked to lawyers, and they have clients calling all the time talking about money. And I don't have that. Now, I don't know if it's because the marketing we do, not just advertising, but all that we do tends to be much more, we don't talk about money in our ads. So maybe we don't attract people who think that way. But I can tell you this, when my clients have lost, when I have failed to win for them, it's not usually, maybe never, the money they talk about. It is the feeling that jury didn't hear me, that I've been through all this and they didn't even care. They didn't even, or they gave, they gave $100,000 on a case that should have gotten 10 times that, or whatever the case is. It's not the car they were going to buy, or the house they were going to buy, or even the security that is money. It seems to me when I talk to them, and I have a unique maybe it's not unique, but unusual perspective, because I stay in touch with a huge number of my clients. And years later, if you're sitting there with them, what they will talk about is how hurt they were that the jury did not recognize and see what they had been through or the responsibility of the other side. And so, so I won't be the one to give you the best answer. But for me, I now at least know my number, and I believe in my number, and I have a conversation about my number. And I think I used to just do much more of a, this number feels right, because if that's what juries, should give, and I just kind of throw out the number, and sometimes it worked, I mean, I've gotten lucky, but it's a great question, because, I am not, Mark Lanier, who asks for $1 billion and gets it. And so I wonder what somebody like that, there's only a handful of guys like that, right? But what do those guys say about how they get comfortable asking for that kind of money? I've actually heard them talk about it, but I've never had an individual conversation. How do you do it?
I think it's to make it less awkward. I think you have to be honest about how awkward it really is. Money is not something that society likes to talk about. Look at the family dynamic. It would be odd if your brother, sister, aunt, nephew asked you, Mark, how much money do you have? You'd be like, what? We're very uncomfortable talking about money in general. I think you have to acknowledge it in order to get past it. I think if you just pretend like it's not there, I've found from my conversations with people that if you just say, let's get messy, let's just talk about money because that's what our system allows, I think people kind of let their guard down. They're like, oh, all right, this is going to be uncomfortable. It's the sex talk with your kids. Right. It's not comfortable for any parent to have that conversation. But if you say, look, this is not going to be a comfortable conversation, but we need to have it, then I think people are a little bit more interested and will allow that conversation to happen. But, look, I haven't figured out. That's why I ask people like you. I think it's a great,
I think your point is well taken. And I do think that people are, I think it's a good point. I think it is a tough conversation, even if you were allowed to have a two-way conversation about it. And admitting that is probably a good thing, but you can have two people who are both on that jury, and they both totally believe in everything you've said, but each of them have such a different view of money that, it really, it's difficult. I had a lawyer in this state who has gotten a lot of 7- and 8-figure verdicts. And I won't share his name now, not because I don't want to say how amazing he is, but just because it's not my story to share it for him. But he once had a jury where he usually asks for a specific number. I've done it different ways, but I've rarely not asked for a number. But he did once where he said, make sure, it was a punitive damages case, make sure you send a message loud and clear. And he was hoping for, and I don't remember exactly, but he was hoping for millions. And the jury came out and they had given him $10,000. And they thought he was going to want to buy them dinner. Like they thought, didn't we show them $10,000? So you got the defendant celebrating and the plaintiffs devastated because of how differently they viewed money. And the jury thought they had given the win to the plaintiff. I've had that experience on both sides to some degree, but I once had a trial where we thought we won and the other lawyer thought he lost. And that was true based upon pretrial offers. And we go back to talk to the jury, something that I've been on again, off again throughout my career as to whether that's valuable or not. But went back and they thought they had given the win to the defendant. They were so disappointed to find out I was happy. And it's just, it's one of those things, right? That money is complicated. And so they don't know sometimes where to go with it.
Well, and I think you need context. I think what you're talking about is the idea of context, because you're right. A $10,000 punitive award doesn't sound significant to one person. It could sound extremely significant to another. So you have to put that in some context. I want to highlight something because I think this is funny. And I've noticed you do it a couple times during this podcast. You downplay how really good you are in this profession. And I'm not going to get off this podcast without acknowledging that myself, and others have as well, as you are well credentialed and well admired in our profession, especially in the plaintiff's bar. I will draw an analogy to golf. I love to golf, and I ask people what their handicap is. Golf is a sport where you have a handicap, and the lower, the better you are. Every single golfer I've ever met in my entire life that is really good at golf says they're no good. So when you say I'm no good at this work, it is telling to how good you really are. Because I think that the best, and I've interviewed a lot of attorneys, they don't acknowledge how good they are, and they're humble. But not only that, they're willing to learn from others. They're willing to receive criticism. They're willing to get better at their craft. And I think that does speak volumes to you, because I know that about you, because I know you personally. I've seen you at work. I've seen you with clients. I've seen you work focus groups. It is amazing to witness. And so that's to dispel for our viewers that TV Mark is different than the Mark that you may meet in person. I've had friends, I've had people that are not in this profession tell me, the husband and wife guy, I'm like, that's the guy. And they're like, they have a perception based on what they're seeing on TV, which is so different than who you are. And I don't mean to say that you're misleading anyone. I think it's just people draw assumptions very quickly from what they may see. I mean, we do that with the media and what we see in politics, and it's human nature to an extent. But you are very, very good at what you do, and I want you to hear that from me, because it's something that is very important to my relationship with you. I do look at you like a mentor, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that, because I don't want people that are watching this to get off and go, "Wow, Mark is not really that good at what he does." And I know that's not what you're saying. I know that.
I care deeply about what I do. I've gotten lucky in front of juries many times, and I've also taken whoopings, and those are the things that stick out. I'll tell you. First of all, it's nice of you to say, and this just happened in the last maybe 5-6 months ago. So to be a certified specialist, you go through this stupid process, but you have to go through it's a lot of paperwork, and you gotta they send stuff to the judges you've been in front of. So about 10 years ago, I went through that process, and then you get recertified every 5 years. So it was time to get recertified. So to get certified or recertified, you have to go through every case you've tried for the last 5 years. So we have this publication. It's been around forever. I saw something. I think they're still around, but they were around a couple months ago, because I reached out to them every time I need to do this, because I don't remember every case I tried in the last 5 years. And I ordered up, every case that I had tried. And as I went through it, it was so many good memories of cases I won. And the reason it was, not so many, but it was nice memories of cases I won, because I didn't remember. I never think about the cases I won. Never. I'm in touch with some of the clients, but I never. I thought when I got that trial report, I didn't really thought about it, but I expected to get the trial report back and just see one L after another, because those are the things I think of. And to see hey, I did pretty good in the last 5 years. And of course, most cases don't go to trial. And I truly believe, look, it's not just what I believe, it's facts. When defense counsel has to give their detailed feedback before a trial to the carrier, in many of those cases, the first thing they want to know is the plaintiff's lawyer. Their data, they know who's who. They know the difference between the lawyers that fight the fight and the ones that don't. And even when I go to trial and lose, I know I've helped every other client that I will represent in the future by being one of the lawyers that actually does go to court, which is an unfortunately small percentage of the people that do what we do. So do I care about this stuff? Yes. Do I try to be good at it? Yes. The rest of the stuff I'd leave to others, but I've gotten lucky once in a while, and it feels, it feels good when you get those wins. And yet, I don't know. I come back to the office after a win and I start digging in right away. The losses are just, even when my client ran another one and admitted it was her fault, I truly believe there should have been a split of liability, and it continues to bother me on a case where I was never going to change her life.
Right. All right. Before I let you go, I want to ask you what I call the fast five. It's
I'm
5
ready.
questions. This is going to be hard for you because they're short answers.
I'm there. 3 words or less. I got you.
Okay. Favorite dessert?
Banana split.
Why suspenders?
Because they're out of style, so I can stand out.
What does the P in your middle name stand for?
Paul.
Motivational quote.
I have a lot. This is not motivational, but my favorite quote is control the controllables.
Love that one. Last one, chess or checkers?
Oh, chess.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Playing,
Mark.
I'm playing chess. They're playing checkers.
Right. Mark Breyer, thank you so much for your time today. It was absolutely incredible to have you on. I literally, and I can't say this about every guest, I could talk to you for hours. I know your time doesn't allow that, but I could dig into some of the stuff that we talked about, and this could go on and be probably the longest podcast I've ever done. I won't do that to you or to our viewers, but I do appreciate the time. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for scheduling this podcast, setting aside some time and sharing some insights on this profession.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Jonathan.